Hi and welcome back to Real Opinions. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Post, but in a slightly different way to usual. I'm going to split the review into two parts. The first being the much longer part, where I'm just going to talk, as I am now, I'm just going to be breaking down what I thought about the film. And then the second bit, I'll be talking about its relation to All the President's Men. As from the few reviews that I've read, it seems like it's very much like a companion piece to that film. And it's something I've never seen before, and so I think that this gives the review a fair balance between my experience of the film on its own, and then I can also give you my thoughts on the experience of the completed piece, essentially. So the first half I'm just going to be talking about The Post. The second half I'll be talking more about The Post in relation to All the President's Men. So The Post, it is directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, as everyone probably already knows, and it's following the leak of the Pentagon Papers. So it's a study that was created by the Secretary of Defense at the time of the administration, reviewing the history of the Vietnam War within the government. And of course, it turns out that war isn't a great thing, and particularly the Vietnam War was not a great thing because it was just posturing and gambling with people's lives, really, just to stop communism. And so it's dealing with this stuff getting leaked to journalists and them having to deal with the repercussions of, do we put this out or not? I feel very much the same way as I do with this film as I did about Spotlight 2 years ago. 2 years ago? Yeah, where it's just a very good newspaper film. That's it. It's a good journalism film. Of course, people always make the same points that these films stick with critics more because you're talking about something relevant to critics. And I definitely agree with that because I think I enjoyed this film more because of the idea of working in journalism as well as being a writer, and I found it quite inspiring and motivating to work harder, to create better work, and to research and to put in the time and effort into creating something that you can be proud of, and giving the truth to people. That's what all journalism stories are about, and I do think that inherently applies to people that work as critics. But even though I think that the sensibilities of the film definitely apply to my sensibilities, I don't feel like the film was enough to push it into greatness. I don't think there was enough there. And I don't think it's anyone's fault in particular that it hasn't got enough of a gut punch reaction to everything. It's just that that's inherent with the story. There's just not enough there for me to really get involved in the story. The direction by Spielberg, of course, elevates the material to a whole new level. I think that while his camera work wasn't as, flashy or as noticeable maybe as even as Bridge of Spies, which I thought that his camera work in that really helped to improve the story. In this, I think it's less noticeable, but he uses the ensemble cast really well to create a frantic atmosphere. There's lots of scenes where it's not particularly long camera shots, but they're very complicated camera shots, not in just the movement of the camera, but by multiple people having multiple conversations at once and dipping in and out of them. And like I said, it just creates a frantic atmosphere, and it creates a very communal feel to the project as well, which is what I think made me more enthusiastic about it as well, is because of the idea of working together as a team to produce this one piece of work, and I found that really, again, inspiring. But of course, Tom Hanks is brilliant. Of course, Meryl Streep is brilliant. Do I think either of which deserve awards later this year for them? No. But I think that they portrayed the characters as best that they could. And normally I'm not a Meryl Streep fan. I mean, I'm aware that she's very talented, of course. But this was one of the few films that I've seen her in where I actually really enjoyed her in it. And I think that she took what was a well-written script and gave it an extra that just realised it as well as it could. And, of course, the script is really good. I've kind of been following this film for a while just because of the screenwriting process that it went through. So the screenwriter Liz Hannah, who had never had anything produced before, dropped out of her job to write this dream script, and then in the years since writing it has now been turned into a Spielberg film, which I think is every aspiring screenwriter's dream. And so I've been following it for that reason. And I'm very happy that it wasn't a thing where I was disappointed by the script. I thought that actually stood out more than the directing in this case. It had some really good human moments, more than just the because I feel like a lot of journalism or political thrillers nowadays, they all try to do the Aaron Sorkin thing, where it's just fast, witty lines back and forth very quickly. It's A, B, A, B, A, B, people talking back and forth to each other because they have to be quippy. And this, it was messy, but in a very human way. Like, people would interrupt each other, not at, like, usual interruption points in cinema, where, like, you get used to a certain beat or a certain rhythm of when people interrupt, and people were doing it in odd moments here, and I thought that I say odd, but it felt natural, and I really, again, like I said with the Meryl Streep thing, you can attribute that to the acting, and I think that definitely helped support those moments, but it's still there in the writing, and I thought that, if anything, just for those moments, I'd actually want to go back and look at the script, and like I said with all the ensemble stuff that Spielberg does, I'd like to go back and into the script and see how much of that is in the original script, and because it seems like some points they must have been written in, and yeah, I'd be really interested to read the script, just because I'd say that it's a good example of how you can still keep within a genre and use that naturalistic dialogue. And the reason I brought up Meryl Streep before is because there's two particular moments where these aren't moments where people will walk away and go, oh, remember that moment, but just for someone particularly looking for those things, it was both scenes where Meryl Streep was just having a conversation with someone, and like I said, it was the interruptions and just the way that they were handled, I think, really. I know I'm getting held up on this one point, but I tend to do that when I ramble on the reviews. But I think it pushed the people past their usual boxes that they could be sorted into. So, like, Tom Hanks as the pushy editor, the money-hungry board members, like, it just took the edge off everyone in a good way. I will say that I think that the amount of knowledge required to like this film is a weird place, because I don't think that I had enough information to fully enjoy this film as much as I could. I think that they introduced a bit too many people all at once, and it becomes kind of hard to, like, you know the main players because they're played by actors you recognise, and you know they're going to come back. But there's a lot of moving parts outside of these central 4 or 3 characters that seems like it's you're not really sure where allegiances lie or who is meant to be playing what in relationship to everyone else, and new characters just kept getting heaped upon each other, like, scene after scene, and I think that it gets a bit messy. Obviously they're trying to go for a very realistic story, and I think that if I knew more about the history of the Pentagon Papers, I think that I'd find that even more enjoyable to say, oh, that person is playing that person, and so on and so forth. But with the amount of information I had, I felt like I didn't get as much of the recognition buzz that I suppose that they aim for with a lot of these biopics or political thrillers, etc. But also at the same time, I think if you knew too much about what happened, then I suppose maybe you would say, I know what happens anyway. That's not to say that I think that in order to fully enjoy this film, I think you should research ahead of time. I just think that part of me wished that I did know more before going into it. And I think that people that study journalism in the US, which is where a lot of the positive reviews are coming from, they will obviously know about it because it is very important to journalistic history, and so they recognise who the key players are. And I just think that that's a bit of cultural knowledge that my loss of me not knowing that just stops another level of enjoyment of this film. I know I haven't said really anything bad about the film, but that's just because there is nothing that stands out as being bad about it. It's one of these films where it is good, but it's not great. And there's no standout moment where you can go, this exemplifies why it's not great. It's just not got that extra thing to it. Yeah, and that's my thoughts on it. I will cut now to Future Jack after he's seen All the President's Men, and hopefully he has something to add. Right, now I've just finished All the President's Men, and I have to say that it definitely works as a companion piece because it is a very similar film, and I have exactly the same points about it as I do with The Post. With All the President's Men, I feel like unless you have some basic information of what happened already with the Watergate scandal, I don't think it's a very good way of jumping into it for the first time hearing about it. A lot of names thrown very thick and fast, and if you don't know what the basics were for that entire scandal sort of slowly unravelling, it's quite hard to follow in places, more so than The Post, actually. So I think The Post definitely has been more tweaked and appropriated so that general audiences can understand it more clearly. The styles are very similar, very, very similar, including the kind of the overlapping dialogue and the ensemble directing. It's all quite similar. It's a lot more secretive because obviously it's focusing on two journalists rather than the two people that run the newspaper. But I would definitely say that this, while not working as like a direct sequel, which sounds weird to say for being, 30 years apart, I'd say that it definitely works as like a double bill of a film. And yet I think between the two, I think that there's probably like a favourite in there somewhere, because I think that the story for the Watergate scandal, All the President's Men, is much more interesting. However, like I said, it was quite hard to follow in points, and I don't know, I feel like I just needed more information myself to know it. I wouldn't say that you have to watch it to fully enjoy The Post. However, I do still believe that if you knew more information about the Pentagon Papers for The Post and the Watergate scandal for All the President's Men, I think that does just lead to greater enjoyment of the film. Great, thank you very much for listening. All the reviews, sort of doing them again back on this channel, as well as the podcasts are all going up on this channel as well.